Well, I was up to my college library the other day, and I was looking through the books, and I came across this book, the Counter Creationist Handbook by Mark Isaac. And I got this book because I was hoping that it would give a concise summary of the scientific case for macroevolution. I was kind of disappointed in that regards because when I got it home and started looking through it, I see that it is, as the title would suggest, a counter-creationism handbook. In other words, the format of the book is it will list various claims made by different creationists and then give a response. And there was another um, uh, observation that I made of the book that I was very disappointed with, and that's how it conflates uh, ID, the intelligent design movement, with creationism. Now, in the section on ID, and by the way, uh, years ago when the ID movement was first starting to come out, I was at an Answers in Genesis seminar, and during the question and answer time, I asked Ken Ham uh, why what he thought of ID. And I don't remember exactly what he said, but I think it was something like it's good that they're trying to argue against evolution and things like that, but it's not as biblical as it should be. So it seems that Ken Ham, one of the foremost um, if we had to pick a spokesperson for young Earth creationism, it seems that he would uh, reject that ID is part of creationism. And also, another problem with conflating ID with creationism, it seems to me, is that uh, when we think about evolution, uh, the theory of evolution is something that is supposed to explain how life has developed, not how it originates. So I think creationism uh, would also, although it does speak against evolution quite a bit, uh, it's kind of focused on the origin of life to begin with. And then there's some confusion with some creationists where they will think that uh, the first emergence of life is part of the evolutionary story, which it isn't. So I think with ID though is not talking about life beginning, but life as it now is. There are certain organisms which are said to be irreducibly complex. The bacterial flagellum, for example, certain biological structures which are said to be irreducibly complex. So um, that is a feature of life as it now is, or as it developed after originating. That's another difference between ID and creationism, I would think. But at any rate, in the section on ID, he lists various kinds of creationism, and he says that ID is just one more kind. But then he goes on and quotes various young Earth creationists as though they were ID proponents. So this whole book is really a doozy, um, in my opinion. There were a couple of things in here that are not necessarily related to ID or creationism. Well, they're related to it, but not necessarily on that particular topic. But a couple of these questions that I wanted to read and the responses. The first one, it's on page 262, first cause, CI 200. The different creationist claims are given these letters and numbers. There must have been a first cause. Every event has a cause. The universe itself had a beginning, so it must have had a first cause, which must have been a creator god. H.M. Morris, 1985, pages 19 to 20. Now, H.M. Morris, this is in the ID section of the book. H.M. Morris is not an ID proponent. He's a young earth creationist. ID proponents, I believe, almost universally are believe in an old earth. All right, so here's the response. Number one, the assumption that every event has a cause, although common in our experience, is not necessarily universal. The apparent lack of cause for some events, such as radioactive decay, suggests that there might be exceptions. There are also hypotheses, such as alternate dimensions of time or an eternally oscillating universe, that allow a universe without a first cause. Okay, so that is what I wanted to respond to. The assumption that everything has a cause, although common in our experience, it's not common in our experience, it's universal in our experience. And then he says the apparent lack of cause for things such as radioactive decay suggests that there might be exceptions. So we have a suggestion that there might be an exception. That's not a very strong statement, but the thing about radioactive decay is you first have to have a radioactive substance, a material cause. You have to have the laws of physics, which is a physical cause, the laws of radioactive decay. So you don't have, in this case, the poster child exception, or what suggests that there might be an exception, is a false example of something that is happening acausally. Says there are also hypotheses, not theories, not laws, not something that's been proven, but there's hypotheses such as alternate dimensions of time or an eternally oscillating universe. Well, if there is an eternally oscillating universe, well, if there's an oscillating universe, it would not necessarily be eternal, because it seems that each time it bounces back, it would lose entropy, so that eventually, so that by now, we would be in a state of equilibrium. But we're not. We're not. The universe isn't at the heat death, so at some point it would just, it wouldn't bounce back anymore. It would just, I think, keep expanding forever and reach a heat death. So it seems that if there's an oscillating universe, it would have to have a beginning, and if it's eternally oscillating, the cosmological investigations have ruled that out. Alternate dimensions of time. I mean, if we can just assume whatever we want, then perhaps we could get around the cosmological argument. But what we're talking about here is not what sort of ad hoc excuse can we pull out of our butts because we want to reject the conclusion. What is more plausible than not? We know that the universe had a beginning, that the universe is contingent, therefore there must be a creator. God exists. Alright, the second objection to the first cause argument. By definition, a cause comes before an event. Well, let's stop right there. That is not true. We've got there's a logical order: cause, then effect, cause, then effect. The effect comes logically after the cause, but there is nothing in the definition of cause, of the word cause, that says it must be chronologically before the effect. It could be simultaneous. If we start defining things, um, we can define things in such a way that we get the results we want, but that's not being intellectually honest. Um, if time began with the universe before does not even apply to it, that's true but irrelevant. Um, he says if time began with the universe before does not even apply to it, the word before, and it is logically impossible that the universe be caused. And then there's a third objection. It says this claim raises the question of what caused God. If, as some claim, God does not need a cause, then by the same reasoning neither does the universe. Now, this, it well, I'll have to, I'm almost out of time here, so I'll have to continue in part two with that third objection to the first cause argument from Mark Isaac's book, The Counter-Creationism Handbook. Don't know who Mark Isaac is, but he does seem to be cognizant of the scientific literature on various aspects of biology. Um, so maybe a biologist, but we'll leave that question aside for now and move on to part two. Shalom.